Many claim that electric vehicles are well poised to become the primary mode of mobility in this country. However, I think the question then becomes, how are various players in the Indian ecosystem, from the original equipment manufacturers to automobile manufacturers themselves, how are they prioritizing electrification? To shed more light on the subject and share his vision for a connected, shared, and electrified India, may I please invite on stage a very special guest. We have with us the CTO of Bosch India, Jean-Oliver Roehrl. A huge round of applause for him, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I came a little late, but I could sense right from the beginning this is a very serious, let's say, reunion here, so I put a tie. And I've chosen also a very serious color for my presentation, which is black. But now coming to the subject of it, across the globe, cities are drastically expanding. By 2030, the world's megacities will be home to more than 5 billion people. And it's estimated that in the same time frame, the annual worldwide passenger traffic will exceed 80 trillion passenger kilometers. So that's a 50% rise compared to 2015. In parallel, global freight volumes will grow by roughly 70% during the same period. And nowhere, ladies and gentlemen, this will be more evident than here in India. Further, there's a consistent rising affluent class that demands efficient, clean, but very specifically even more transportation. So there's a strong need for efficiency. It has become increasingly evident from the GDP spent that the logistics is inefficient. And these figures, they translate roughly between 13% to 16% of product costs. And in spite of measures just recently introduced, such as a GST or e-bill, especially in the freight sectors, there doesn't seem to be an impact on the logistics spend so far. The congestion and deteriorating air in cities is a common sight. There is no doubt that India will continue to grow, but this growth brings in complexity in terms of people and freight movement. Air quality, quality of life itself, will deteriorate if we do not jointly act now. And friends, it is our opportunity to co-create a future for mobility solutions of a new India. A platform for efficient mobility is imminent. However, this cannot be achieved by one participant alone. This requires extensive industry consortium working together. So we have to take a systemic view with public-private partnership of scale and speed. And here I would speak about a framework now where we should all collaborate and be mindful to create a responsible solution. A framework focusing on solving the inefficiencies, embracing diversity, and being encircled by safety. So thinking in frameworks, India's immediate focus should be on creating more organized jobs. So keep economy steadily moving upwards while doing it in a sensitive manner to keep CO2 output to a minimum in the medium term and while focusing on a sustainability of the world's resources in the long term. So system efficiency must be at the core of anything we do. So it's not just a question of what is the right technological approach. Is it an EV? What type of a battery cell is being used? Please, we have to take a more holistic picture. While electrification may be the right technology in the current market scenario, specifically for passenger cars and smaller vehicles, such as the aforementioned 2- and 3-wheelers for inner city transport, it may not be a solution for all vehicles. If you just take, for example, long-haul trucks, and this is a rising segment as well, of course, in India, and other transport sectors, such as aviation and ships, they do not have a ready-made electric solution, not in the medium term. And freight trucks, aviation, and ships contribute to over 50% of greenhouse gases in the mobility ecosystem. So these sectors need focus if the world wants to reach the agreed well below 2-degree target, which was also signed by India in the year 2015 in Paris. So synthetic fuels synthesized from renewable energy may be the only solution here. There are two views one must take. One is the tank to wheel, CO2 view. the net CO2 emission released during combustion in the engine. And here, of course, electrification is perceived to have a huge role to play because there's simply no combustion process, hence zero CO2. But the second view, please, and this is one most of the time and most of the discussions is not taken, is a well-to-wheel view, which focuses on how much additional CO2 is generated to produce or transport fuel, or in the case of a purely battery electric vehicle, the electricity. And herein, the net CO2 output depends, of course, on the energy mix of a certain geography. And me coming from Germany, I must tell you that also Germany is lagging far behind its own targets of renewable energy. So renewable resources such as hydro or solar is subsequently used to charge automobiles. The net well-to-wheel CO2 output is minimum. However, in regions that are reliant on coal and on other fossil fuels to generate electricity, the net well-to-wheel CO2 emission levels would be worse than using the fuel directly in the vehicle. So in short, we should electrify two-wheelers and three-wheelers, load carriers specifically for the so-called last-mile connectivity, city buses and small cars for urban areas, while making a systemic shift to e-fuels for the long-haul segments. And by the way, these synthetic fuels, they can just be blended with any other kind of already available fuel, means that all, let's say, infrastructure being built can be just reused. Indian cities are witnessing increasing ownership of private vehicles, and for the industry, that is a good news. The transportation sector in India accounts for roughly 18% of commercial energy consumption and is highly dependent on oil imports. India imported approximately 80% of oil at a whopping cost of 5 lakh crore in fiscal year 2018. A recent study done by our Bosch research team put the share of logistics costs in the cost of goods sold at roughly 14%. This can be cut in half with intelligent trip planning and sharing by avoiding, for example, empty return trips. So roughly 1.5 lakh crores is spent annually at the Indian metros just due to congestion. In New Delhi, for example, roughly 8 to 10% of the land pool is used for parking alone. Hence, it's important that we not only focus on vehicle technology, but please think in connected ecosystems. The vehicle as a node or as a sensor in the Internet of Things, combined with the use of field data and data analytics, will help us make trips efficient and curb the vehicular population. One of our aims is to bring multimodal transport systems to life, for example, by connecting two-wheelers with bus and rail networks. So we are pursuing a wide range at Bosch of projects in this area. Coop, for example, our e-scooter sharing service in Berlin, Paris, and Madrid, is constantly expanding, and our fleet will soon number more than 3,500 vehicles. In addition, we are pursuing driverless parking in connected parking garages. So back to India now. We are currently running a pilot project at the Electronic City Hub in Bengaluru, and here we are using the Smart City Sensor Network to capture traffic data. A back-end AI system processes these data and controls the traffic signal network to ease congestion. This traffic management solution has also increased the reporting of traffic violations by more than 100 times, which finally will also help to enable enforcement, and we just spoke about subsidies and how to finance these. Vehicle efficiency. It is important to take steps that have immediate impact while working on the long-term goals. The future is definitely electric or electrified, so battery, fuel cells, synthetic fuels. But it may take some time. Infrastructure needs to be built. Technology takes time to mature. Trust of the customer needs to be earned, also by economic solutions that finally do not need the subsidy carrot. The potential of electrification is, however, huge. Let's take the example of the two-wheeler for a moment. So we heard that around 21 million two-wheelers were sold in India last year. If you take now an average fuel consumption of half a liter per day, electrifying all new two-wheelers only sold could save approximately 18,000 crore rupees worth of fuel imports. For really achieving such results, strong and reliable regulations are a premise. Certain segments can immediately get more efficient by moving into hybrids. And we spoke, to my mind, too brief about hybrids when I was following the discussion here. The passenger car segment is an example. And as I spoke earlier in the presentation, synthetic fuels and efficient ICE technology could be the key in general and specifically to the long haulage segment. Any shift, dear colleagues, must be done very, very responsibly. It is essential to retain and improve the employment rates in the country. Disruptions affecting permanent employment rates are usually counterproductive to the economy in the long term. And however, transformation to electric is imminent here. At Bosch, for example, we are upskilling our associates who work on ICE technologies to work on electric and other domains. Until the infrastructure is in place, the use of alternative fuels such as CNG, the aforementioned synthetic fuels and hybrids are key towards transitioning to an all-electric future. Conclusion. Looking ahead, I believe that three things are needed to help the mobility industry achieving its ambitious targets here in India. The one is a thorough, comprehensive, consistent, and please tech-agnostic legislative framework, and the need to look at the systemic efficiencies, or in that case, inefficiencies I was speaking earlier. The second is a kickstart to large-scale connected and shared mobility to ease congestion with heavy public transport at the core, with a healthy public transport at the core. The appropriate physical and digital infrastructure must be created. Scalable connectivity solutions based on open standards are the central enabler for the future. And finally, connecting vehicles and infrastructure, providing data, analytics, and maximizing asset utilization. And the third is that the transformation must be done over a time horizon such that the industry and finally the employment opportunities are not disrupted. Thank you for listening, and if there's any question, I'm happy to take this now.
Sir, my name is the chairman of a well-diversified group of companies. Thank you very much for your illuminating presentation. So my specific question at this moment is, you mentioned that you're doing some studies in Bengaluru on the traffic, which is already showing some results, and maybe much more will follow, including reduction of violations and all. Are you doing such a thing in other cities? Would you like to consider, or you are doing something about it in Delhi? We need this very badly.
So for the moment, sir, we are doing this with regards to India only in Bengaluru. That is, let's say, a question of anything that is related to a first starting point, yeah, I would tell this now, and to collect data that we also share with the public authorities.
Good morning.
Hi.
So you spoke about solutions that depend heavily on analytics and modernizing the face of mobility, right, with respect to autonomous vehicles and traffic management. We understand that there is, in some quarters, skepticism of the relevance of these solutions in terms of how soon we can see them, not that whether or not we will see them. Indian context. Do you see Western markets adopting these solutions quicker than the Indian market? And when do you think India can realistically look at these solutions? Is it, say, post-2025, post the initial wave of adoption of electric? Or is it something that can go in tandem with electric and be built as and when the electric mobility is growing within the country?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a very valid one. And to my mind, India has here a unique advantage compared to any other country in the world. First, if you just look on what is happening on your mobile phone landscape, how fast you are upgrading from 2G, 3G, LTE, and now 5G. So let's say the infrastructure is here rapidly expanded, far quicker, at least as I perceive it, than compared to, for example, Europe and specifically to Germany. The second advantage is that you in India, you have not this concern about the usage of the data. Yeah? So you are far more open so far to share data, and this is also an advantage compared to, for example, European countries. So there is on the technological side, but also, let's say, on the ability to adapt side, there are two advantages where I see that compared to any other country, you can move far quicker ahead.